The Slave Catchers Come. Page 51. Deeply upset by the sight of the scars on Martin's back, Laura went up to her room, leaving him still at work in the pantry. She took out her needlework and sat down in her rocker by the west window. She was sewing a ruffle on the bottom of a green cotton dress to make it longer, for she had decided it showed a little too much of her ankles. But she was not thinking of her sewing. Her mind was in turmoil over the happenings of the past few hours. It seemed that her world was turning upside down. At Uncle Jim's, she had seen only gentle treatment of slaves. His slaves were never beaten, and if they were ill, Aunt Ruth cared for them as if they were her own children. Laura wanted to believe that all plantation owners were as kind as the Montgomerys. But Martin's scars were proof that this was not true. Perhaps, she told herself, he was lying and had been beaten because he had done something bad, like stealing. Yet, even that wouldn't be a reason for so cruel a beating. Besides, she believed Martin had told her the truth. As she puzzled, she rocked furiously, and her sewing lay in her lap. The clock on the front stair landing chimed 9. The slave catchers had time to get a warrant to search the house. Since no one had appeared, Laura tried to convince herself they had not decided to come. At any rate, Bert was outside watching the road, so he would stop anyone who approached. But every time a dog barked or hoofbeats sounded on the road, she stiffened in alarm. She wondered if Joel would come this morning. Probably not, so he wouldn't want to draw attention to their house, She liked his appearance since he had grown up. He wasn't exactly handsome, but he looked to be the kind of person you could trust. It was a pity he had such strong ideas about slavery. Deep in thought, Laura was startled to hear voices in front of the house. She ran to the front window and looked down at a group of men, one of whom wore a sheriff's badge. The bell in the front hall rang as someone tugged on the bell pull outside the door. Then Laura heard the doorknob being tried. "It's locked," one of the men shouted. He stepped back and stared up at the house. Laura dropped the lace curtain, hoping he had not seen her gazing out. She was horrified to realize that the strangers would have walked directly into the house if the door had not been locked. Again, she wished Prince were alive. He would never let them into the house. Through the thin curtain, she could see the men talking together, apparently trying to decide what to do next. Bert came around the corner of the house on the run, with the wide tin fork that he used for digging potatoes still in his hand. "Good morning," he cried out. The men whirled around. "Oh, good morning, Bert," the sheriff coughed nervously. "We've come to look through your house. Hope you have no objection." "Why did you come?" asked Bert. Laura was amazed at his unruffled manner. "You know well enough," one of the men growled. Bert turned to him, and Laura could see the surprised lift of his eyebrows. She had not guessed her brother was such an actor. The sheriff said politely, "We are looking for a runaway slave, and some people think Joel Todd brought him here last night." "I heard there was a fugitive around," said Bert. "Of course, you can search the house," he said. "I guess you have a search warrant." "That we have," said one of the men. "A young fellow with a crust of black hair," said one of the men, a young fellow with a crust of black hair. "I'll bet you're sorry to hear that. Show him the warrant, Sheriff." "Don't hurry me, Walt." The sheriff pulled from his pocket a paper which Bert studied carefully. The men were getting restless. The young man called Walt pushed his face close to Bert's. "You know a search warrant when you see one. Now get that door open." Bert said politely, "If you'll wait here, I'll let you in. I only have the key to the back door with me." He fished a large key out of his pocket and held it up for all to see. "Since when do you lock the doors when you're working in the garden, Bert Eastman?" asked one of the men. "Seems like a good idea with the fugitive loose in the countryside," said Bert. "Especially since my sister's alone in the house." Walt said, "Oh, yes, your sister. I heard she came back here from down south." "Hear she's a good looker, too." Laura blushed, glad that she was upstairs behind the curtain. What a rough lot those men seemed to be, all except the sheriff. And yet they were acting according to the law, trying to catch a runaway and return him to his master. It was hard for her to remember that last night she had thought it would be best for Martin to be caught and returned to his owner. As Bert started around the house, one of the men called after him, "Not so fast, Bert. I'll go with you just to see there's no monkey business. Spread out around the house, men, and make sure that darky doesn't climb out of a window." Laura was shocked by the hate in the man's voice. Why, he sounded as if he thought Martin was a criminal. She ran to the spare room. Martin was not in sight. She opened the wardrobe, whispering, "Are you in there?" Pulled aside the clothes until she could see Martin's face. His wide, frightened eyes peered out at her. "I'm here, Miss Laura." "Don't let them catch me, please." "Stay quiet," she cautioned. She closed the wardrobe door tightly and hurried back down to her room. Downstairs, the front door crashed open, and booted feet sounded on the hall floor. "The cellar first," someone cried out. The men thudded through the house like a herd of buffalo. Less than 5 minutes later, the footsteps pounded up the cellar steps and began to travel through the rooms on the first floor. Now and then, Laura heard a crash of a chair being overturned. Standing in the middle of her room with her fists clenched, Laura's anger and fear grew with every passing moment. Judging by the noise downstairs, those men wouldn't miss a corner of the whole house. In no time they'd find Martin and take him away. She kept seeing his eyes and hearing his voice begging her not to let him be caught. Someone was on the back stairs, running lightly, taking the steps 2 at a time. Laura could not move. Still, Laura could not move. The quick steps hurried down the hall to the spare room. A moment later, they reached her door, and to her amazement, Bert rushed into the room, pulling Martin after him. Without a word, he flung back the carpet and knelt to lift the trap door. A man's voice came clearly up the back stairs. "He isn't down here, men. Take the next floor." Bert had the trap door open and was pushing Martin into the opening as the men swarmed up the stairs. Whew! Laura heard them go into Bert's room and from there into the attic over the kitchen. Now Bert had the trap door in place and was pulling the rug smooth, while the searchers prowled about the spare room, tapping on the walls and even opening bureau drawers. What did they expect to find in a drawer? Laura wondered in amazement. The loud voices carried easily into her room. "Look under the mattress," one said. "I heard about a darky who crawled under a feather bed. Only way they found him, the feathers tickled his nose and he sneezed." "Look in that closet over there," said another man. "That's a dandy place. Look good behind those clothes." Bert pulled Laura's rocking chair into the middle of the room, directly over the trap door, and shoved her into it, none too gently. "So," he commanded. Now the searchers were at the door of her room. Ooh.